Hello, folks. I got an interesting one here that just got here about an hour and a half ago. I went to the gym, came back, and here I'm presented with a vehicle. Let me give you a 2 minute backstory. 2 minutes, trust me. So, one of the guys that work at one of the stores, he told me about this interesting vehicle he had been sitting for a couple years at a shop, and the guy couldn't fix it. Not sure it was replaced or anything, but I don't have all the in-depth stuff. But long story short, sat for 3 years. If it's at 3 years at a shop or around 3 years, and it hasn't been fixed, and might come get your car. So I said, look, man, we talked about it over the course of like a couple months, and I said, look, just I'm ready. I want to get that car. Bring it to me. If I can't diagnose and fix this thing, I'll pay to get it towed back. But if I fix it, you got to pay me. So here we are. Finally, I wound up getting the vehicle, and first thing is, does it crank in any instance? Like, does it have the ability to do that? Looked in the trunk, and I got lucky. It's a battery in there. It's got year 2021 on it, but I got it on a charger right now, doing its thing. That's charging up. It does have the capabilities of rotating, so we're in agreement with that. That's the main thing I need. And I don't really generally pay attention to the year of anything, but being that this car is 1994, yeah, I don't know if I have the capability of hooking up any type of fancy diagnostic tools, but we do have a diagnostic port here. And oh my gosh, I never have to use these. Oh, look at this. Oh, interesting. I'm not sure why that's there. Maybe that was jump for the fuel system or something. I don't know. That's something interesting though. I just happened to pop that open and then discover this jumper wire here. One of that is a context clue. I'm gonna leave that right there. But in here, it does give me information of what has power and what don't have power, and these are very integral components here. I don't know specifically what they mean, but I know IG means ignition. We got ground down at the bottom, and FAB, I don't know what that means. I know we got some battery positive grounds and stuff. I don't know. So we're gonna keep that in mind. Don't know what that jumper wire is in it for, and that's the context clue here. So main thing I want to know is, before I start looking at any data, I have done zero research on Identifix. I don't know anything, but this is basic. I doubt if it has an OBD2 port and I can hook it up, but I'm going to find out. But I'm going to do this off the cuff at the moment, and I'm going to try to make this simple while I'm doing this. So the first things first, we're going to hear what it sounds like. The battery should have a charge on it to where it'll rotate decently, get about a couple hundred RPM, and so we can see what it sounds like. Now, I did check coolant. It didn't have any milkshake looking substance in there. It is low, no big deal. I didn't check the oil, but let's see what it looks like in the valve cover. Looks beautiful in there, actually. Yeah, don't look bad. Looks really good. Smells good too. Let's see what the oil level looks like. Yeah, that's the main thing. Where is my dipstick? There we go. Got oil in it. So put that back. I made mental note. There is some modifications done to it. There's a header. This should be the oxygen sensor. That's disconnected. Not going to worry about that. The biggest thing is to get this started up. And the EGR tube is blocked off. I'm not sure if it's blocked off physically at the EGR, but this is exposed and open. I'm going to make note of that. That's the EGR tube that goes over to the EGR valve here. And normally when they modify these, they get blocked off completely. That'll create a bad vacuum leak. This does have a mass airflow sensor, so make note of that. Without further ado, let's get this camera set up. Let's see what it sounds like, and based off of experience, depending on what it sounds like, how fluid each cylinder sound. That will give me some direction. I want to hear a good even tone on all cylinders. I don't want to hear any drop in compression. I just want to hear all the cylinders be even. So the sound should be uniform across the board. So let's do that, and we'll do some basic stuff. Add supplemental fuel, brake cleaner in the intake. I don't have any starter fluid, but brake cleaner will work just fine. And go from there, because there's a possibility because I swear on these older vehicles, those diagnostic ports, they'll grant you the ability to check for powers going from that source, because it's kind of like a dumb system. I think they just have like a teed off wire going to that diagnostic port, and that's how you check for powers and grounds, depending on what the circuit is, if I recall properly. Okay, don't hold me on that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is add supplemental fuel. If that don't work, then we're gonna check for spark, and we're gonna just do a basic test with that. I could use a timing light, but I don't have any external way of starting the engine up, and I'm not gonna do that. And so I'll just lightly set the camera up, or get a plug, ground it out, and look at it that way. Or I could probably hold the timing light in the vehicle outside and just see if I see some flashes. So that's the old way I'm going to do if I need to check for fire. So we need fuel, fire, and compression. And this is a 94, so that's what we're checking before we start checking all the complex stuff, crank sensor, any type of reference voltage, all that fancy stuff. So let's start with the basics. We're going to check for fuel, then we'll go to fire, because the compression is going to be answered when we rotate the vehicle, so we don't have to worry about compression. And of course you need timing, so I'm going to ignore that too, because if the car was in time, if the car ran but out of time, it would backfire or will start up extremely poorly. It'll run bad, but I'm going to assume the timing is good. Let's check for fuel. It sounds beautiful, actually. So I'm not gonna worry about timing. Compression sounds amazing. The one other key thing besides that jumper wire that we saw in there, that diagnostic port, is that buzzing noise. That chime constantly goes off even when the key is in the on position. So I don't know if that's a context clue or not, but just be aware that that noise is going to be a thing. But I'll try to keep that minimal. All right, moving on. So we know it sounds good. So we got compression, timing. We can assume that this is a straight up conjecture, but the timing could be there. Now, what I think we got crank sensor problems, but I wouldn't be surprised if the crank sensor was replaced. I don't know, but worst case scenario, we're going to scope it and find out. So, but let's still go through the necessary steps. Compression sounds good. Let's check the supplemental fuel. I'm going to pull off a valve or some access port. Here's one right here that goes directly to the throttle body. I could pull off the breather hose, something that I don't have to run the risk of breaking something. So I'm going to I can pull that breather. Let's see if this is loose. Let's pull this off. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, let's pull this off. Pull the intake off. Let's spray some brake cleaner in there. It's gonna have to be like take 2, because I was recording. I thought I was and I didn't get it. But I added brake cleaner in here. I'm gonna do it again and to show you that it just didn't work. I thought I recorded, but I didn't get it. But I'm just gonna, so just for proof for y'all, I'm gonna do it again. I'm not gonna lie, it sounded like it wanted to hit for a minute. It sounded pretty interesting. It should have ran with that fuel in there though. If it wanted to run, I think it's worth just pulling the plugs out and checking them. But let me pull a wire off, and maybe I can. Yeah, I'll take a spark plug, an old plug, ground it out or something. Let me take this here. Let's just, maybe I can take that. I don't know if that's gonna work. Let's just see what happens. For the sake of space and time, the first route I did as far as grounding that plug, the plug out with the screwdriver, it didn't work. But mind you, when I go to rotate the engine, we'll turn the ignition switch on, there's an initial spark because my light on the impact gun was working. Now I have a separate power source for my timing light. What I'm gonna do is old, I never get used. And I'm just gonna put this on cylinder 1. I'm gonna shine this light. Well, I could probably use like a piece of tape or something to hold it, but I want to shine this light in this area here. Start the engine and see if this works. Like I said, this is old, loose wires and everything. Give me a second. Take this around here. Problem with like these old vehicles. We're gonna leave that right there. I should see some flashes. So it should happen. Hold on. Smell something burning in the car. Call me crazy. Let me look at the camera. Okay, so cool thing is, I think we're getting a little further. I noticed that it did spark when turning the key forward to the on position. That's why I cycled the key on and off. That light came on, so it was sending an initial fire. I'm going right to the computer because there's no way that it can have the capabilities of firing and it don't have that continuance of fire. I don't think a crank sensor is going to do that. However, I could scope the crank sensor and make sure that I'm getting a constant waveform. I could do that, but my instinct is just telling me to go to the computer because it seems to not know how to process information. And like I said, I kind of smelled something burning in the car. Let me see where this computer's located. Let's pull that out. Let's inspect that, and we'll go from there. So the computer's gonna reside here behind the passenger seat. And just from looking at it, hold on, let me turn my light off here. It looks normally old, but you know, it does look like it has potential water damage. Let's pulled. Oh, let me see if I can get this straightened out. So what I'm gonna be looking for is any type of crust, green, anything green on the pen. Looks fine from here. Let's just pull the computer out all the way, and there's only it's 10 millimeters. Only 310s holding it in place. Pull the cover off and inspect that, but my screwdriver evidently developed feet and walked off. I can't even find it. Shoot. Uh-oh. I'm gonna pull this whole thing off. I have a little conviction that this might be good, but I never know. I'm thinking just pull it out, inspect it, see what it looks like. If it got damaged, then that's where we're gonna have to go. I mean, it could be, still could be a crank sensor though. I don't know. Well, I mean, when I see that spark and it just stops firing, that makes me think, you know, maybe we got a crank sensor. And then the fans start going off. I don't know if the PCM controls the fans, but that was another thing that bothered me. Like, why was the fans they started blaring? Some strange reason. I wonder if I could repair it. Even if I'm smirked. That capacitor though looked like it can be pulled out and replaced. Let me turn my light on. Better. Could these pins have anything to do with it too? You know, those pins down at the bottom. Right there. It's worth looking into. Check for continuity. Well, I doubt there's some soldering problems, but I do think that our issue could lie in the transfer of voltage in this area. It'd be a bad idea to check, because that's not good. And then our capacitor here, look at that. Put the capacitor over, it is burnt out. And has it separated? Yeah, the capacitor did bleed out. I don't think I have a capacitor laying around, but it might be worth just trying to replace the capacitor if you can't find a computer. Test those diodes. Test that one. Replace the capacitor. See if I can get a part number or something off of those two. I'm not no soldering kind of guy, but it is worth trying. Check the connections. My thing is, well, how did it burn? Like this here. This is burnt up. This is just insulation. Alright, I think I kind of chased my ass I think I chased my ass testing that computer. It was kind of dumb of me. to pull it out and a waste of time. I think because like, why am I checking a computer when the pulses are coming to the coil intermittently? And there was one point when I was cranking it up, and then the light started flashing a little bit more. I was like, you know what? I need to go to the basics. Let me just check the basics. Ground wiring should be worth checking because looking at the ground strap in the back, it looks horrible. But I think I need to go to the crank sensor. Let me find out where this crank sensor lives, because I remember on some of the other models is they're right in the front here. Let me find out where that live, and let me hook up to that really quick, scope that, see if we got good powers, good grounds. I probably could take a test light, load test the ground, see what happened. Let me do that and we'll get set up. So little do I know, this is going to be the crank sensor and the cam position sensor. Didn't know. So pull the basic wiring diagram for it, and this should have powers and grounds just like any other sensor. I'm not sure if it's Hall effect or not, but I know this black one here is supposed to be ground, and I'm going to find out which one's positive. It's been replaced, so it's new looking, but just because it's new don't mean it's good. Let me get a little more info, find the power, tag on the ground, and see if it can support a load test. Worst case scenario, well, likely what I have to do is hook up the oscilloscope and see if it'll extract a waveform. So if it has voltage and ground, it should just be like a regular Hall effect sensor instead of a variable reluctor. And that produces more of a oscillating wave versus a square wave this should generate. Just gonna have to ignore that noise for a little bit, but we're gonna go to red and white, which is the positive, and then the ground is gonna be the black, and I should have an illuminating test light, which is pretty bright. And I'm like, well, does it stay lit when it's cranking? So that's one thing I don't know, but this is a constant power source and a constant ground. The ground is supposed to be on the right side of the engine. What I could do is just move the engine harness and see if the light stays on. It should be on the left side somewhere. That was me. I don't think this ground strap have anything to do with it. I think we're good on the ground. The signal, that's one thing. Am I, is it generating a signal? So ground, power, these other two should be signal. Depending on what kind of signal it is, could I emulate it? Like on a Dodge, is it a pull up, pull down? I imagine. I mean, I maybe it's worth trying. Let me, just out of curiosity. I don't know. Don't know. I got a test light, so. Pull up, pull down. Okay. I can somewhat emulate a signal. I didn't know that. So it's kind of, So if it gets a ground signal, just like a Dodge, then I can emulate a signal. So it's worth putting an oscilloscope to it and see if I get a constant signal. And if I do, if I get a nice waveform, I mean, do we condemn the computer to be bad? If I don't, then the new unit that they have on here is this bad. I don't know what this other wire's on here for, but if I'm manipulating or adding ground to this white wire, this obviously got to be my signal wire. So this, oh, I'm getting shocked too. My arm is on the ignition system. Yeah. So I think, yeah. So let's get the oscilloscope. Let's look up on this white wire. Let's see what the waveform look like. So I got the oscilloscope hooked up. It's a very simple circuit. We checked for powers, we checked for grounds. We have those two. The only thing we need to make sure we have a good signal coming out. And what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set the time base on a 1 second per division scale. All right, I already have my lead on the power source to test it, and I do have good voltage. So I am hooked up on a sufficient ground right here at the injector rail. And all I'm going to do is take my piercing pin, go into the signaling side, that white wire, crank it over. Well, I'm going to start my time, crank it over, see how it's responding, shut it down, and assess the waveform. It's gonna look a little weird because the car is gonna be starting up, and it's just, all right, let's see what we got going on here. I'm gonna try to start it up, and then we'll get a capture. I don't know what I'm looking at. Don't know how this system is. Don't know how the teeth look on the gear. So we're just looking for a good square wave and a good signal. Shut this down. So this is man, wow. This has to be a defective. So this is me getting to the car, starting it up, and what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna capture one with me not cycling the key on and off, because this is me doing that at the end. That's when it starts working. Let's try this again. But that's how it's supposed to look. This is a great square wave, just like that. You can see a nice pattern, just like those. That may be like how a pattern would look. Small, medium, and that gap, and another medium size one here. So let's do it. Turn the key on and start it. I'm gonna wait 2 seconds, then I'll do it again, so I'll know where the gap is and what I'm doing. So let's start over. Okay, so good news is when I analyze the waveform, it's definitely looking like just a bad crank sensor. So this is one thing that we can never overlook new parts. I'm not going to condemn it just yet though. Reasons being, I need to make sure that the power source is not dropping off during cranking. Because if the power source is dropping off during cranking, then we need to figure out why the power is dropping off and go from there. So when I turn the key in the crank position, is this 12 volt dropping off? And is that where our issue lies? So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take I'm gonna get off the signal wire, go right to the 12 volt source, and it should hold constant when starting it up. Now, logically, yeah, I can throw another channel on here, but we see everything that's happening. This is the on position. When I go to crank it, we'll get a waveform and then it'll do nothing. This is me cranking it. Nothing's happening. When I stop and go back to the on position from cranking, then we'll get a waveform. Then it'll stay up. Then go back to cranking again, this will happen. Then when I let off the key in the on position, it'll happen. So let me check and make sure the 12 volt is staying constant, because if not, we can add a supplemental 12 volt source and this car should run. We're going to pull the 12 volt source and see how that responds. Now, logically, I'd imagine it'll stay consistent and we should not have a drop off, assuming that the 12 volt source is legitimate. If the 12 volt source drop off, then need to start checking elsewhere for that 12 volt source. And maybe what I could do is just supplement that 12 volts with something more reliable, like a jump box, like a battery I got sitting over here, and we'll see if it actually cranks. So let's do this. I can't even get it out right. I'm currently hooked up on the 12 volt source. We'll crank it. We'll see that voltage increase, and let's see if it stays steady. All right. So there's our 12 volts. And that's me cranking. Oh, that's me cranking it. The voltage is dropping off. Cut the car off. I go back into the on position. Voltage comes back, and then it drops off when I starting again. Let me look at the wiring diagram, see what this 12 volt source goes to, and let me add a supplemental 12 volts and see if we can get a good waveform, something good and consistent, because it wants to work and then it stopped working. So we're lacking 12 volts. One thing I did notice when I pulled the wiring diagram, though, was the common theme with the 12 volts, I want to say, was the mass airflow sensor. I got to look back at the wiring diagram, so it could be something pulling that down. Let me look back at the wiring diagram, formulate a game plan. What I could do is just simply pull whatever components has a common source of voltage and see if that voltage stays steady. All right, so yeah, the mass airflow sensor shares the same 12 volts. Now, what are the odds of it failing and pulling the voltage down? I mean, I don't know, but I'm going to pull this and try this test again, because maybe when it detects mass airflow, it shorts out. I don't know. It's quick and easy. Before I start putting jumper wires on here, and this is, oh, my light died. This is what I'm gonna do first, and let's recheck our stuff, and go from there. All right, here's the test with the mass airflow disconnected. Let's see what happens. So we got the same thing. Go to start it, drops off, comes to. I mean, what is the other theme here? Oh, I did not look, see where the 12 volt come from. I think it came right from the computer. Remember, I said I checked the computer and there was some capacitors that was broken, damaged. An electrolyte was in there, so contacts was bridged. Things were not working properly. So it might be a defective computer. Let's add a supplemental 12 volts. Let's do that. Let's see what happens. All right, I got a supplemental 12 volts hooked up. I got my jump box, well, it's just the battery. Here's my jumper wire. And there it is going into the red and white wire. That's the battery positive wire. So now let me let you hear it. Things are getting activated. So now it has no choice but to stay constant. And I got my oscilloscope hooked up on the signal side. So let's check the signal, see if we got constant signal, which we should by the logic of stuff working, powers and grounds, we should. Because it wants to work and we saw it fall off. Logically, so if we keep it consistent, it should stay consistent. So we should get a nice square wave and it might start up. So I'm going to face the camera on the engine and I'm going to let my oscilloscope or my scan tool do the recording and we might get it to run. I don't know. Let's see what happens. I'm pushing the record button. I got my power hooked up. All right, let's see what happens. Wish me luck. It didn't start, but let's see if we got a good constant waveform. Check that out. Beautiful. That is amazing. That is amazing. Look how beautiful that square wave is now. We have supplemental power. We got good waveform. What else do we need? So logically what's happening, the computer has failed internally. That is it. I mean, I'm going to condemn the computer to be the problem. The computer sends 12 volts to the cam or crank position sensor right here in the back of the engine. When you go to start it up, the computer can't sustain that 12 volts and it falls off in the start position. But could I be wrong in any other aspect though? I don't think so. Well, no, I don't think so, because the power should be constant. I mean, it's the wire, that wire is just going from here straight to the computer. That's it. It's the computer's job to be able to differentiate what needs voltage during a crank position versus not, or in a run position. So I think I'm going to condemn this computer to be bad, but I do want to know if I add a supplemental fuel, will it start, or could I get this to start? But I don't know if the light was working, if the ignition system was working properly. Gotta look back at the camera. So after doing some thinking, I think that's it. I don't think I need to go any further. The computer's bad, and I did think I was chasing my ass earlier with this computer thing, but I'm glad I scoped the crank sensor that is located here in the back of the cylinder head. So I putting all the context clues together, even though I spent 20 minutes inspecting the computer, checking it out, there were some problems with it, and the capacitor was burnt up and some other corrosion. So the next scene only should be me putting another computer in there and it's starting. So the thing is in 1994, I don't know where I would find the computer, but I know a guy who had a turbo Miata and he had a standalone in his vehicle. So I'm gonna give him a reach out tomorrow, see if he actually has a PCM for this vehicle, which I doubt, and we'll go from there, see what happens. More than likely, it'll just have to be an eBay purchase. I'll try to get on there tonight, see what I can find. So I'll see you in a little bit. All right, it's the next day. I couldn't sleep last night, really, because there was something that was bothering me when I made my finalized assumption that this thing needs a computer. And I'm like, there was one thing specifically I did not check to condemn that, and that was constant power going to the PCM. And let me explain. They remember when when I added a ground signal to the module, the crank position sensor, the test light illuminated. When I added power to the crank position sensor because it was absent, the test light didn't illuminate. So one thing is the computer is capable of sending fire to the ignition system once it receives a ground signal. But for some strange reason, when I administered power to the crank sensor because it was absent, we had a good wave and it did not send that spark to the ignition coils. So what I want to do, I need to check the computer and make sure the ignition switch is sending, or what needs to supply power to the PCM is constantly getting power. There's a there's a violet wire that's supposed to be 12 volts, and then there's supposed to be another one. I'd imagine it's got to be another wire somewhere. I did not pull wire diagrams yet, but this was just on my mind here. I'm gonna pull up the PCM powers and grounds, see what needs to be sent out to the engine, and see what's in common. Maybe when I go to start the car, the ignition switch that's supposed to send power to the PCM becomes absent, and then it takes away power to the components. So let me pull wiring diagrams, see what goes from the ignition switch to the PCM to supply power, and see if that's dropping off. And that's what's killing our power source to the crank position sensor. Because logically, it should fire. It should. And I should be able to get it started, assuming that the power is absent at the PCM. So it should work, despite what we're seeing. Let me see what I can do. So, based off the wiring diagram, this blue wire is supposed to constantly supply power during the starting. And if not, the ignition switch is going to be bad. And I gave you my explanation as to why. So we're going to plug up in here. Should see if I got a good ground. Test light should illuminate. No. Make sure I got a good ground. Okay, let's see what happens. I'd imagine if I start it up, look at that, the power's gone. And, that explains, hold on a second. That'll explain why we're losing power at the coils. Because this is supposed to go to the coils, and it's supposed to supply power to the PCM. I feel stupid. I really do. I should have known. Let me jump one of the circuits that has constant power and supply power to this. This should be our constant power here. Let me see. So that power gets absent there too. One of these, let me see which one of these wires I could probably use. I could probably jump on that one. What's this one? Yeah, I could probably jump on this one too. I'm gonna bridge this wire with this wire here and see what happens. I feel dumb. I really do. I should have. This is why I couldn't sleep last night. I'm like, you know what, Brad, you skipped something. All right, let's see what happens. Let's see. Might get lucky. Oh wow. You hear that? It hit. I'm just more mad that I was wrong and have such high conviction than being right. Let me spread supplemental fuel in there. Let's see what happens. Got gas in it. I'm not sure why it's not staying running, but I'm not even happy that I figured that shit out. I'm just not happy because I had such high conviction and I was wrong. would have put a $600 computer in there if it would have cost that much, and I've been wrong. That's not cool. And it was just like probably like a $50 part. Why is the vehicle not getting fuel? I think there's a little gas in there, but it sat for so long, it might be bad gas in there. But I doubt it because the brake cleaner working. Let me play with it, see if I can get it running. This was the main thing. At least, you know, I was wrong, which was fine. Luckily, we didn't throw a part at it. This is free still. And I'm going to, let me get it started. Let me see what's up the injector circuit. Maybe there's another leg in the ignition switch where it doesn't supply power. Because right now, if I turn the switch off, it stays running like a runaway diesel. So I found the chime and I got it to shut up, so it's not gonna be making that buzzing noise anymore while I start checking some other things. The owner, called the owner. I had to apologize because, man, I just don't like being wrong. Now, technically, we still do need a computer. We're just not going to replace it just yet. I just want to get the bulk of the problem that we got resolved. So he said they replaced some relays. I think this right here should be the fuel pump relay. It does start up with that buzzer thingamabob. It does start up without it. I do need to get some information on this joker here, so I need to come prepared when I start recording, and then I don't. Let me see if I got power to my test light. Yes. I'm just gonna go off the cuff, check for, I don't hear anything. Let me see what happens since I primed that. It's not activating, but let me see what happens if I do activate it. See what it does. I don't hear anything priming though. Maybe this is not the fuel pump relay, or maybe this is bad. Okay, I hear something in the trunk now. Okay, let's see what happened. It might be just out of gas. Yeah, let me go to the gas station, get some gas, and this may be the computer issue right here. So if the computer's broken and it's supposed to send out a ground signal here, then that could be our fault with the computer, and that's where the computer replacement will come into play. So ignition switch, I'm 100% confident with that, and I'm still on the computer because typically the ground side is not a significant load, and that's what a computer typically would supply, a low side switch, which is a ground side switch. So, but I can hear the pump in the back. So I hear that in the back. I think we just need to go get some gas. Let's do that. All right, I went to the gas station, got gas, and I put 4 gallons in the tank. Went to try to start it up and it's not doing anything still. So I checked for power here on the blue and red wire, and it's illuminating because this is the wire that goes directly to the fuel pump. Check it again, it doesn't have power. That's the wire that goes to the fuel pump. This green wire down here is what gets the ground signal from the PCM. So I'm definitely going to say the PCM is defective too, in combination with the switch at the moment. So if I have power going to the fuel system and the fuel system's not priming, and I'm going to show you that, then you know there's something wrong with the fuel pump. Even though the owner said he put a new fuel pump in there, human error. I'm going to jack the car up in a particular fashion and see if I can get the fuel pump to pull in the gas that's in there, assuming that it's probably just floating around, I'd imagine, and see what happens. But still, the PCM is going to be defective and ignition switch is going to be defective, because I can artificially give this relay a ground signal simulating a PCM, and the PCM is not doing its job grounding this out when I try to start it. And let's check that fuel system. I pulled the fuel pressure regulator off and it's not bleeding. So here's the fuel pressure regulator. That's off, detached, and it's not pushing fuel out. And I have that relay jump still, and it's coming out as a trickle. So it wouldn't surprise me that fuel pump's probably not sitting there properly. Let me see if I move the car. I'll probably jack it up and see if I can get it to come on. Let me try jacking the car up. No, it's in there properly. Why isn't it working though? Sitting in there really good. All right, let's see what happens when we supply power to it from the relay. Does it come on? Could we have an obstruction under the car? Yeah, there's our wire right there. I can remove it and constantly have power. Let's see if we got ground. If I need to jump that, let me get a jumper. Go here. We'll just recheck it. So we got good power and ground. The fuel pump, the new pump, might be bad. Let's bang on it, see if it'll come on. Nope. So let's check for power at the pump itself, the harness. Let's pull this back out. And it's been sitting there for years. Water may have got in there, rusted it out. Let's get a ground. Let's check for power. At the blue wire, we got power here. Let's check in the back. We got power there. Pump is warm. Should work. I didn't check for ground, but logically, I mean, I'd imagine it should. He got it off of eBay. Oh, that pump is hot. Wow, that pump is smoking. You see that smoke coming from it? It's burnt up. That's exactly what it is. Bad fuel pump. It's smoking. Let me pull this off right here. He has a fuel pump sitting in the trunk. It's still smoking. Yeah, you can see it. Let me see if this fuel pump that's in the trunk works. 1 second. Let's do this. Oh yeah. Let's throw this one back in there. Let's see what happens. Let me call him and see if he want to just throw the old pump back in there, or if he want to get a new one and throw it in there. All right, the old fuel pump's back installed. Now, logically, since the old one worked, this should prime and make a mess around here. So let's see what happens. Yep, there we go. So now we have fuel, unlike before. I got the fuel pressure regulator back installed on the engine. I'm gonna install the fuel lines, and everything should work. I'm gonna keep the fuel pump relay jump. Car should start up on its own and run perfectly fine until we get an ignition switch. Now I want to add mid-video, I was wrong on one thing, but still technically correct. And it was the power source going to the computer from the computer to the crank position sensor. Okay, so what was going on was, because the power source was interrupted from the ignition switch during the starting position, since that power source was eliminated, it took a power away from the PCM to power the crank position sensor. So I just want to add that. So there's no longer any supplemental power going to the crank position sensor. It's utilizing the power on its own. And I think I explained that earlier in the video, as far as like why I got a little confused, but it's cleared up now. And because that one context, that one clue is what really messed me up, and I'm glad it did, because something just didn't seem right as I continued just to only think that we needed a computer. And that's what led me to the ignition switch, and that's what led me to check the fuel system. And here we are. So we need three things. We needed a fuel pump, but we got the fuel pump fixed. We needed a PCM, because the PCM is not sending power out to the ground side switch, low voltage reference, to the fuel pump relay. Okay, so that's the only reason why we need a PCM at the moment, but we can jump that. Fuel pump's fixed. The ignition switch is not sending power out to the components such as the PCM and the ignition coils based on the wiring diagram, and that's why we need ignition switch, because when we turn it into the start position, it kills the power and it does not crank. That's why I'm able to jump the ignition switch and it works. And that's why I'm able to jump the the fuel pump relay, and it works. So I'm bypassing the things that are broken. That's the cool thing with old cars. You can't do that with new ones. Let me get this in here, and then we'll start the car up and see what happens. Before I start the car up, I just want to go over the ignition switch real quick, because I'm kind of doing this off the cuff while I'm recording. I'm not really hyper focused on some of the diagrams, just tackling the issues as they present themselves, and then I'll start doing some stuff. So that's why I'm kind of everywhere. But this ignition switch has two power feeds, and these two power feeds have their own distribution where the power needs to go in certain positions, such as accessory, on, and start. So these are dedicated power sources, and the feeds are fine. It's just the output, which is why I condemn the ignition switch to be defective. But this is jumped, so we're bypassing what it can achieve, and giving us the ability to look for other things. And so the computer is still going to be a problem because, again, I'm not getting any type of ground from the PCM to this relay. And it would be a good idea just to go straight to the engine computer, find that wire that controls the fuel pump, and jump that with the test light and see if it restores operation from the PCM. So what that'll do, that'll ensure that the wire integrity from the PCM to this relay is sufficient. I don't know if you remember one of the videos that I did with the Honda Accord the Honda Civic. Remember, it would only work on dry days. When it would rain, it would cause a problem. We saw the same thing in this computer here, and but unfortunately, this didn't intermittently work. It just didn't work. The other car, at least, even though it killed the fuel system, it worked on certain days. So anyway, let's jump this. The fuel pump's priming. You can hear it. Sounds great. It should work on its own. We should be in good shape. Let's see what happens. Oh, it didn't. What's up with that? Okay. All that gas that I put in there is what killed it. So she's working on its own now. Awesome. Shut it down. Oh, I can't cut it off. That's right, because I got ignition switch jumped. If I pull the wire, it'll shut down. Well, crazy, it's still running without the fuel pump relay jump. Wow. Was I wrong on the fuel pump relay too? I think I probably was, because it's still running. You know what I didn't do? You know what I didn't do? I probably was wrong on that. And you know what? I'm not even mad. I'm not even mad because I didn't check power. I should have put it on 12 volts and check for a ground signal. But the thing is, I didn't hear the relay jumping. I didn't hear that. Oh wow, now it wants to work. Now it don't work. That's crazy. Am I crazy? It worked. No, now it's okay. So I think it's everything probably all in the ignition switch. And this is what threw me off. It threw me off because it wasn't clicking. Now it's clicking. That's crazy. It was working and then now it's not. I promise you this relay was not clicking.
switch. I mean, I guess everything's all in the ignition switch. I mean, I don't understand it. It threw me off. At least crazy. I don't know what to say. I guess the ignition switch is the primary culprit. It's crazy. That's crazy. So what's happening, I guess, because of how the computer system is, it has to prime, and likely that's what screwed me up. But I just don't want to sit there and say the computer still don't. I'm not going to act like it don't need to be replaced. You know, like behind her, for example. You know, you turn the key forward, certain times it's not going to prime, but then certain times it will prime. And I wonder if this is one of those circumstances. But I should have tested that ground using battery positive, but being that I was looking for activation, trying to listen for a click, I screwed myself over. But the cool thing is we didn't replace the part or anything just yet, but it still needs a computer. I'm not ashamed saying that, because it works and we still had burnt capacitors, that it don't. Maybe it'll work for a while without it, but right now, primary issue is the ignition switch. That was causing the bulk of the problem, and then the fuel pump being bad was the other problem. Yep. The owner came back with the new ignition switch, and I got that installed. It was just one screw sitting up top there. I was able to access that with no problem because this car has already been through. Everything works perfectly fine. I don't have a jumper in the relay for the fuel system, and the car starts up as it should. Note, I'm not pushing the clutch in. When I turn the key all the way forward, all the lights stay on. All the lights on the dash. Push the clutch in. Starts right up. Set it down. So we're cool in that aspect. So I guess the ignition switch was causing two problems, and mainly the computer wasn't getting the necessary inputs that it needed consistently to start up, and I guess a strong enough input. I guess I didn't check the inputs to the PCM, which I should have, and I should have, in hindsight, should have definitely done a couple things differently. But here's the ignition switch, the inside of the old one. You can see those blackened areas. Well, that's where the contact points were needed, and they were absent. This is the original switch, it looks like. You can tell based off the discoloration. The new one is white looking, it's perfect, it looks great. This one just looked aged and tarnished. But this build up, or blackened area, this rough area of contact, this is what will cause things to not work appropriately. And I'd imagine something's supposed to be in the center here that broke off. So there probably was a couple things that happened. I mean, this is the original. This is a '94, so this Switch is like 30 years old, and it's it served its purpose. This car went through 3 shops, and it's been 3 years from what the owner told me. Nobody couldn't figure this out. I mean, and I don't blame them. I mean, wiring is not that easy, and I can understand why people want to start throwing stuff at it in hopes it'll repair this problem. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take this car on a test drive for the first time after 3 years and see how it performs, and come back and give you my feedback. We'll conclude this video. I just got it back off the first test drive. It was just a mile. I ain't got no tag on it, so I just took it around the back road. The car don't want to get above 2,300 RPM, and I think it's partly due to the fact it doesn't have a upstream oxygen sensor. This is a 4-pin sensor here. So if it doesn't have an upstream sensor, and being that that sensor is very integral for operation, especially with the car this old, it's not going to know how to manage the fuel system, and it's probably stuck in open loop, and it just doesn't know how to. It doesn't know how to navigate with the RPM or the power range, because that engine combustion process determines the adequate air-fuel ratio that needs to be achieved while driving. I'm not sure how they drove it this long like that, but and again, it's been 3 years. I'm not sure if these headers come with a bung for the oxygen sensor, well, if they're the proper ones or not, but by the looks of it, doesn't look proper because the intermediate shaft is hitting the header down at the bottom, and you can see the rub mark that has been hitting that header there. So I don't know what to do besides, you know, looking around for a bung and having to probably put an extension wiring harness on it, and retesting. I thought it was initially like a throttle position sensor problem, but I mean, that's hooked up. But normally throttle position sensor issues will have initial acceleration problems. It wouldn't be a transition into the RPM, and it wouldn't be able to initiate that transition in the RPM that well because of the throttle position's importance. It usually, when you press the throttle, that's when that throttle position sensor kick in of how much fuel to deliver, and after a certain threshold, then all the other sensors such as the map and air-fuel ratio sensor or oxygen sensor kicks in. But it needs that feedback, I'd imagine. There's no check engine light on, but it still could be a computer problem, being that the computer does have a broken capacitor. Maybe that's what that capacitor, it serves a purpose with fuel delivery or something. I don't know. That's the unfortunate part of working with these older vehicles. I do need to have the basics, which is the inputs going in and the outputs of that engine, so you can dictate the values if you had the proper information of how much fuel is coming in based off of a mass airflow value. But you need that information of what's coming out, and I have not seen a car yet where it manages well without an oxygen sensor. Sometimes what can happen, depending on if this car has 2, it'll have a downstream sensor and it can use that calculation to operate the vehicle. But I don't even know if that has it at the bottom either. Don't know. But I'm gonna tell you what, as far as this car running, I'm gonna leave this alone because the video is just going too long as it is. I think it's gonna be like an hour and 25 minutes. But I'm gonna try to leave as much information as I can, the steps that I've taken, my mistakes, the successes, and learn from my mistakes. That's my biggest thing, and that's why my videos are so long. I want you to learn from what I do wrong, and I want myself to learn from what I do wrong. Even though I've done this, it's over and over, I still make mistakes. But hindsight is always 20/20, like I said before. this car is done. It came in from 3 different locations, and 3 years later, here it is. I got it running in 3 hours, and we only needed one part, which is, well, the purchase part, which was the ignition switch. So I achieved my goal at the end of the day, and I don't have to pay to get this car towed back anywhere. So we're in the green. But I'll tell you what, I'll keep you updated if we're gonna go further with diagnosing this other issue. But I know I'm gonna have to and investigate that. But if anything happened, I'll definitely update. Hit that link, subscribe to the channel, stay informed how to reach us my work. See you next one.